Right, here we are. This is a bit of a voice addition to a video which I made, it's 2017, after the Honda, which you'll see, had been put back together, restored if you care to call it that. Not really restored, just had a lot of work just to make the bike rideable and good. What we're doing here is we're leaving H Café, which in the south of England people may know, in Oxfordshire, a place called Berensfield, and we're heading down towards Abingdon at the moment. We'll take a left at a set of lights up here, or just after the lights, and start winding our way. Essentially we're following as best we can the Thames and what is the main railway line, the London to Bristol railway line, crisscrossing that all the way back into Tilehurst, which is the west side of Reading. The route itself was shown to me many years ago by a lady friend, and I just never knew it was there. I was, what? Of all the times I've been up and down the road, never twigged that it was even present. So it was a revelation, and a nice revelation if you're riding sometimes I've done this on an old 350 BSA. This is the frustrating part of the ride. You see here we're just going through a 30-mile-an-hour limit, which is one of those roads that, why? But anyway, obviously there's been some incidents probably associated with the H Café. A lot of motorcycles up and down the road there. There have been some nasty fatalities, and obviously the speed limits are gradually winding in. I'm sure the speed cameras are regular visitors. So this way cuts it through the back, 30 into 40 and back down to 30 in a minute, and then we turn left. As I say, we head then through a couple of villages whose names I can never remember, essentially whiling our way through to Didcot, Didcot, where we'll bounce around the edge of Didcot and then turn right after Didcot, which will take us across, almost running parallel with the main Reading to Oxford road for quite a while, into some enjoyable little, not lanes, but enjoyable roads nonetheless. As I say, this was taken in 2017. I think that crash helmet has long since gone in the bin, and the bike has subsequently had a few more additions to try and make it reliable and sweet. A bit like the Forth Bridge, it's yet to have its suspension done, but I purchased the bike foolishly. I bought it blind. It was cheap, and you break all your own rules. And when I got it back, I realised that I just bought, it was just a dog. It had needed a lot of work, and at the time, my working life was busy, and I outed the. I started on the engine, and I thought, you know what, I'm just never going to get this done. It's going to sit in the corner, isn't it? And I decided to either throw it away. I say throw it away, get rid of it, or give it to somebody to sort, which I did. PDQ Motorcycles in Maidenhead, Taplow in actual fact. And there was a chap there that raced CB750s, so I thought, well, no matter how expert you may consider somebody, if they do that and he's had it to bits and he knows, that's got to be the man. And the job was far more retail than I wanted it to be, of course, but they're a business and they did a great job, and took it to bits, cleaned it, basically freshened a lot of it, rings, stuff like that. The internals were basically found to be very good. Just one of those bikes that suffered that sort of neglect, which I'm sure a lot do. Excuse me. So once we got it back, we then sort of like start the not restoration, but try and freshen things up. I put braided hoses, braided lines on it, started going through new tyres, obviously. So we had tyres, braided lines, brake pads. I don't think I replaced the back ones, unless. But anyway, there on, I sort of rode it a bit. Yeah, the engine's running sweet, but it was a bit fuffy here and there. I had a problem with the electronics. I put dynamag coils on it, which is a bit head scratching. You have to put resistors in, and it was just, oh dear. It's I had it in bits, put it back, in bits, put it back, in bits, put it back. That's the nature of the older motorcycle. And subsequent to probably this video, it's had dynamic ignition, electronic ignition put on it. So it's obviously that's improved the starting and indeed the running. The clutch, when they rebuilt it, it's one of those things you can't get bits for the clutch. And I was like, what, really? No, we got they had the friction plates, but not the actual steels. And the clutch it's not been good. It's not the clutch that's bad, it's the gear change. And I don't think doing the clutch I'm not sure that doing the clutch has sorted the problem. But anyway, I put a complete new clutch on this year, or last year should I say. Steels and friction plates. All the friction plates were distorted, convex or concave, or rusty, or rusty. So I thought, let's just do it. So we put all that stuff on. That caused me a bit of head scratching because there were more bits in the clutch than the book said there were, and odd bits. When I actually sort of did a lot of research, I found that in actual fact what the bike had was an addition, which is a plate that stops clutch chatter. It's like a double thick metal plate, so you throw away, I can't remember what you have to take out one metal plate and replace it with this thicker plate, which is almost like a mini, well, it's not a clutch, but it's a peculiar piece. Anyway, it was rusty. Anyway, and what I could just initially I thought, what's this, and had to do a load of research to find out why my clutch had a different amount of steels and this great big thick piece in there. Eventually found it to be a modification that is known about, said to reduce clutch chatter, and I decided that I didn't care about clutch chatter, so replaced it as standard. So put the steels and the friction plates in, and it changes gear a little better, but I have a feeling a selector fork's bent. It doesn't seem to it goes into gear lovely from a standstill, well, with the traditional clunk of these Hondas, but changing gear whilst you're rolling is a problem. It's actually sometimes it's better to change gear without the clutch, which indicates to me we've got a selector fork problem. Anyway, that's the bike. It's currently done about 20,000 miles, 2,000 odd miles. Yeah, about 2,000 miles since I've had it. Replaced the clocks and their little binnacle, and if it's out of time, I'll replace it. So I'm not fussy about. It's not a show bike. It's just a runner. The road where we are now is coming down parallel to Didcot. We're turning left up here to go towards Didcot, and we're just going to sort of skim around the edge of Didcot. Really, Didcot now is a fast growth. Well, it's always been on this sort of expansion. The town has gotten it is a town. It's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. It's one of those places that, from a little Oxfordshire, I don't want to say market town, but almost a village, it's grown and grown and grown. Now, to the extent it's got housing everywhere, of course I'd say it suffers, but suffers is probably the right word. It suffers from being on a main road. To our right, as we go down here, a few miles across to the right, is the A34. Which obviously is one of the major arteries, and the planners do love to build where there's a major artery. And subsequently then in the mornings, now Didcot has got traffic congestion problems, same as any other conurbation. It's in the south of Oxfordshire, and as I say, it's relatively close to where we are in West Reading, which is in Berkshire. All this to the right of us used to be fields. It's now massive housing estate. Thought about stopping there, but looked like he had it in hand. As we come down here into these little traffic light sets, the bike is, I suppose at these sort of speeds it's okay. It's heavy and it doesn't respond well to potholes. Obviously the suspension is 40 years old, so it's all squidgy. And say it's Hagon shocks on the rear. I had those when I got it, but the front is, I think, as they always were, it's just like a pogo stick. Probably do something with that, and eventually I will have to do something with that. But it works without fault. Apart from the fact it's squidgy, it works without fault. So as yet, it's not been done. The brakes, as I say, it's disc brake front and rear. The rear disc brake looks like it's come off a car. It's very oversized. I've never seen disc brake so large. I think, and even if you look at the mechanics of it, the pedal, all the linkages, it's almost agricultural. Very unusual for Honda. And obviously it was a first sort of look at it. The bike is what the motor trade would term, I think, as a bit of a parts bin special. End of the line for that model series, single overhead cam, and the frame, all of the cycle fittings are principally the K series Honda. The disc brake is the only, rear disc brake I think is the only addition over the K series. There's some modifications to the frame, slight geometry change, and the engines are slightly different. One of those things where they just keep on tinkering with it to make it a little bit better here, which obviously is a bit of a nightmare if you're ordering parts, because there is a chassis number split within the model. When bearing in mind the model only went for probably, I don't know how many years they ran the model for, not that long. The K6, I think it's called, was selling at the same time, so all very confusing. Where we're turning right here, we've just come past Didcot on the road back to Wallingford, and there's a turning right here you take, and this takes us in a little back road, sort of zigzagging our way across through to a village called Cholsey, and then on and beyond we go up towards the Ridgeway, which is on the road from Pangbourne to Blueberry. I can't remember which one it is. Always get confused. Now there's bridges on this route which you'll see have had a lot of work. The railway has had all the electrification stuff done now. This is 2017. They're actually running now. I'm doing this at the beginning of voicing over this at 2019. Huge infrastructure jobby. Yeah, we can, the merits of the rights and wrongs of it are for others to decide, but to be perfectly frank, no matter how many trains, railway lines they put in, it's never going to be enough, because they just put in more and more people to move around, and it never will end. I don't think. We'll just get choked up. Here's one of them massive tractors. They are when they're in a little lane like this. Those that live in big open countries would not bat an eyelid at them, but you come around these lanes, and some of these tractors are they're just completely blocking the road. Obviously you occasionally get a combine, but so you occasionally get the tractors, not that many. I've seen a few of them, but done with the big rubber tracks on the back, trolling around. I say most of the tractors we've got around here now are just big sort of John Deeres, but they're like, the technology is fantastic on them, but just the sheer size of them. And of course the trailers they have, some of the stylish trailers are not something you want to meet. And you come around the corner and it's a massive trailer, and you sort of pick your way around the trailer, and this is you know, massive rear wheels or flying mud everywhere. So it's you have to be a bit aware. Anybody coming down here on a sports bike will be cursing me because it's quite bumpy, fires you out of the saddle. I don't know what this village is called, but you swing a right here. Particularly bumpy and a little bits of traffic, but it's one of those villages that probably around 60 years ago was sort of a nice, pretty little farming village. Now, of course, the price of property is such around here. Any property starts at, certainly in sort of the Reading, Lower Oxford area, if you could find even a flat for £200,000, you'd be very lucky. These sorts of properties here will be sort of marking the £500,000 mark, if not way beyond that. So it's not an area where the people who work on the land can afford to live. So predominantly the people that live here are either old money or in many cases new money that work in the city. One of the reasons this is so attractive is obviously the railway line. They get on the train into London. Yeah, I'm not going to say in half an hour. That's because that's not the case. It's about, I think it's about an hour and a bit's run into London on a fast train. But of course, once you've got to move from where you are in London to your office, and you've got to get to the station. Car parking in the traffic in the mornings for people in the 7 o'clock run, if that, 6-7 o'clock, it's surprising. Another bridge, go under the railway again here. Then just go out into some more open country here. Slight rolling hills. Oxfordshire itself is very flat. As you come back towards Reading, you pick up, or towards Berkshire, should I say, you pick up some more rolling hill action, as they say. Some beautiful places around the area. You do have to look a little bit for them. As we come over here, this is obviously open fields, both lands. No signs of hedgerows. The money has decided, or the grants have decided, that they need big open fields to keep their crops efficient, which is understandable. Farming is an industry. People say, oh, the old farmers are struggling for money, and if they could do something to make more money, they will, and that's understandable because they're under the same constraints as the rest of us. And if you can stick in big fields like this, you can just put a combine in there and it can go backwards and forwards. The small fields of France or even Devon are not suitable for this sort of arable stuff. Not so much for the soil, but it's just how to work them. And if the hills are too steep, the hedgerows are too many, it's just not productive. Coming into Cholsey here, again you see on the left, yeah, beautiful houses, and very, very desirable. Again, big money. You see a barn on the right here has been flipped around. I don't know whether that's commercial or domestic, but you can bet your bottom dollar it ain't cheap. All of these houses are some of the old money is still here, of course. There's a beautiful church to the right there, and we're up and over the railway once again. As I say, this route tends to crisscross the railway. So as we come down the hill now into Cholsey, again, sort of a desirable little place because there's a village community and there's a railway station. And wherever there's a railway or a trunk road, the people who commute into Reading, Slough and beyond into London are attracted to. So as you can see, these houses, again, they're pulling in pretty good money. It's not that busy. You come through here and hardly see a car sometimes, although there's these village life of Cholsey where people are just going down the shops and what have you, which is normal. into Chelsea, we hang a right to keep ourselves along the same route. And this road is, it's one of those roads we think, oh, Chelsea's not so nice then. But I have seen some places, some roads in Chelsea that are absolutely beautiful. This road is slightly busier, with some estates where the councils of old would have built housing for the people who worked on the land. But of course now it's pretty much snatched up. Even the ex-council houses are selling for £300,000 and £400,000 in areas like this. So the days of property being attainable for the young are, I'll say, long gone. You have to do it, and if you want a house, you have to really put together some money. But that said, all the young are driving around in £20,000-30,000 cars, so when they say they can't afford a deposit, I do sometimes wonder. There we cut the railway again. They come out the other side of Chelsea Village, so back into farmland now. As you can see, there's slightly rolling hills, and we're sort of bouncing along nicely. And I say bouncing along because this road in particular, you look at it, you think, way, and I know even on my modern bike, which is a Triumph, you get a bit of a lick on along here, and it gets a bit sort of pogoy. And the Triumph is a very compliant suspension, soft, but if the truth be told, you can see that the Honda now is whizzing along at its I won't say its maximum speed, but it's giving it sort of a bit of stick, but probably just backed off because I was getting bounced around. This again, open fields to the sides here. I don't know what's growing in those fields, but they don't seem to worry about putting ditches in. And you get nearer Reading, there's a lot of problems with travellers, but perhaps they've got that covered, I don't know. As we bend around here, it's all very open and nice. It's sort of the rolling hills of Lower Oxfordshire, I suppose you'd say. And we're approaching, as we come up here, we're approaching the Ridgeway, which is the old, I'm not going to say Roman, it's before Roman, I'm sure, but the old road. And it's now a great source of people walking, horse riding, cycling, and I think at certain times of the year you can drive a vehicle up there, and I think it's the summer. I'm not sure. It's either the summer or winter. It's prohibited at certain times for ecological reasons. I don't know. To stop damage, anyway. There in front of you is the one of the entrances to the Ridgeway, which runs sort of parallel to this road. Nasty road down there. This is the road from Pangbourne to Bucklebury. It's one of those yomping roads. You go down it, it's blind crests, whatever. Not overly wide. Can get yourself in trouble on this road. It's been resurfaced, thankfully. It used to have a dreadful banding. I remember coming along here many years ago in the 90s on a 1200 Bandit and having one of the big scares of my motorcycling life. I think I got a bit carried away, and the bike picked up on this banding, and it was a frightening experience. It just didn't like it. On the old Bridgestone tyres, which tended to be a bit, well, of the time they were the best thing out there, of course, but they weren't the best realistically, I don't think. And Suzuki Bandit suspension wasn't the best, and when you got a bit beyond yourself, it could get frightening, let's say. They're starting to put speed limits in here because, again, as you see, it's slightly popular with motorcyclists, and of course, if you just look at the road, potential for accidents when you've got a lot of traffic travelling on small rural roads, and this road tends to have a lot of traffic sporadically, and of course people meet in the middle of bends, which is unfortunate and inevitable, I suppose you'd say. There, but for the grace, etc. Road starts to close in now as we near Pangbourne. In actual fact, as you come down there is another entrance to the Ridgeway on the right, a little bit further on, I believe. The Ridgeway sits obviously at the top of a line of hills, and it is a bit further down, but it's along that top of that hill you see on your right, and it follows us a little bit as well into Streatley. There's a very steep hill at Streatley, and it considers this to be the start of Streatley. And to our right, somewhere there, I think those guys are bravely going up there on push bikes. It is very steep, and but it's just a gravel path, really. It's not the most. I think the ridgeway itself is great, but it is generally just a pathway. There's prettier walks through woodland, etc. But of course, the ridgeway spans, I don't know, I'm going to say a couple of 100 miles. I may be wrong. It goes a long way, and it's a fair distance. From here, we're rejoining the Reading to Oxford Road, A329, I believe it's called, in Streatley, and we come back down towards the Thames, and indeed the train station again, the train line, I beg your pardon. Again, some beautiful old houses along this roadway, which is now such a busy roadway. You think, why would you want to live there? But I'm told the back of these houses is beautiful, and certainly these ones on the right here, behind them, they have a very steep hill which takes you up there. That little road there takes you up a very steep hill. A lot of accidents there with lorries when they come down those hills. That hill in particular is particularly steep, Streatley Hill, and lose it on the brakes. Pub's been damaged a few times. The Thames is on our left here. We always look at these houses on the right, see, oh, that's posh, but trust me, the posh ones are on the left. You can't see them, and that's the way the moneyed people like it. There's absolutely stunning places down there. If you ever go to Goring, take a walk along the river in the general direction of Reading. I don't think you can get too far down there, but as you go down there, you'll just see some of the beautiful places, and you realise that there's plenty of people out there with money. This road, interestingly, has got I don't know what, they must have put some lines in from Reading to, well, I don't know, Reading to wherever, but this piece of banding on this road goes on forever. It's not too bad on this road, never was, but it's there. It can be a bit of a nuisance. It sort of picks up in the wet in certain areas, and inevitably, of course, when you go around the corners, the banding sort of always comes to meet you. Lovely stone walls here. Fairly original, I guess. There's a house on the left here, which I believe has unfortunately fallen into disrepair. In that little recess there's a big house behind there somewhere, which apparently the National Trust was being asked to purchase because somebody had done something marvellous Art Deco in it. But however, it had been owned by a business, and it had been left to it'd have to go to ruin, should I say. Again, on the river, so somebody will snap it up. To the right there's an entrance there, and at night time you can see there's that big house back there. I have no idea whose it is or whatever. As you say, we're all over the banding here. So they're coming into Upper Basildon, Lower Basildon they call this. To the left there is the valley of the town, where the river is. Speed cameras obviously here, and probably needed. All these houses would have been quite beautiful when the road was a quieter place. Of course, now it's a busy main artery. You can see some of the houses, almost on the road themselves. This particular place here, it's a business, I think. There's a huge area to our right with some very, very nice property to Lower and Upper Basildon, but a really much bit of a minefield of little zigzag lanes which I can never really navigate around. And just up here, as we come out of Lower Basildon, is Basildon Park, Basildon House. I can't remember what you call it now. National Trust property. yeah, it's worth a visit if you're a member. It's not anything sensational, but it's a beautiful house. Just shows you how the other half lived. To our right here, you'll see this fencing, and subsequent to this video, the whole thing has been replaced with like an 8-foot brick and flint wall, which is a work of art in itself. It took them about a year. I'm going to say a year. I reckon it was more than a year. I reckon they were on it nearly 2 years. Bricklayers were there, road closures, traffic lights, you name it. All paid for by those of us that are National Trust members, of course. It's nice to see, but you do wonder sometimes. Anyway, we're getting closer towards Reading now. There's a place on the left here is like a little animal park, worth a visit if you have children. Beale Park. I believe they've got a little steam train. And so as you see, we've crossed over. The train line is to our right and the Thames is to our left. And we'll get close to the Thames in a minute as we come down this hill into Pangbourne. There's a series of houses here, which I'm told, and it may be an urban myth, excuse me, maybe an urban myth, but there's a series of houses here that are famous or infamous. Not famous, I didn't know anything about it, but they were known to the local residents as the 7 Houses of Sin. Whether this is just a story that's been embellished to me to impress me, and it did. But yeah, it's a good story anyway. But apparently there was 7 houses built along here, which start just after this one here, where a former king kept his mistresses, and that's one of them there. And they're all parked up there. So this former king had them all built, and he parked all his mistresses up here. And then when he summoned one to London, they had a carriage along the road here to the mainline train station, of course, and go up and see to his needs. Basically high-class hookers, I suppose you'd say, but of course they wouldn't wish to be called that. All the houses overlooking the Thames, so they're a really nice disposition, and now this road has become a traffic nightmare. They're just breathing fumes, as they say. Here we come into Pangbourne. There's a big weir here on the river with a nice pub. It's changed owners a few times, and I think it goes 1 minute it goes sort of bargain. Well, 1 minute. Yeah, there it is. So there's Swan, I believe it's called. It's been a bargain pub, a relatively modestly priced pub. It's been an expensive pub, and I think they struggle to make it work just on the basis that there is only so much car parking you can fit in when you're crammed next to the river. There's the Aston Martin and I believe it's Lamborghini dealership. They potter along doing their little bit for the great and the good. And we're now into Pangbourne itself. It'll be a nice little village, but blighted by busy roads, of course. The Thames is to our left, as is the train line still. There's a little bit of parkland. But to be honest, although we live close to it, we don't very often visit in the car because there's very limited parking and nothing of any great draw to you. There's a bit of parkland there. There's a couple of coffee shops. Pleasant, but yeah, it's rather like a lot of villages. Sonning is another one I can think of. Henley's managed to buck the trend. People go to Henley because they see, oh yes, it's lovely. But it's a slightly bigger town. But certainly Pangbourne is nice, but I say we avoid it. We don't avoid it, but traffic-wise, it's like, oh, where are you going to park? If you've got to go there for any reason, and the dog vet's there, so it's always a pain to park in Pangbourne. So there we are. We're coming back now. This is the main drag really back into Reading. So you just go along. We've still got our banding with us, if you see, which the councils do love, and it's not a great problem, but in the wet, in the dark, the bike suddenly announces it's going to change direction. It is a bit, I suppose, not to say dangerous, but you have to be aware. And this piece of banding here, it opens out a bit here. There's another big house to the right somewhere here, solemn house. And they managed to veer the banding onto where you want to be all the time. So as you come into a left-hand bend, you want to be onto the right-hand part of the carriageway. And there's just where you sort of want to cross back over it, it's there. And then on the next corner, I think there's a couple of drains, which is again in the wet. You have to tiptoe around them a little bit. It just could be so nice, but here, there's the drains, right where you don't want them to be. So very often, the locals will sort of cut and do what you think is a strange line, where they cut in tight to the corner and sacrifice their vision. And I'm one of those in the wet. I'll just get out of the way of that. The thing is, you slip on one drain, it's yeah, okay, and it's really inconvenient and a bit of a moment. But there's another drain straight after it, which and I think if anybody got really enthusiastic, and people do silly things, of course, you'd be in for it. This is Purley again, bordering Thames. We're really nearing the sort of Reading area here. I know people are very fond of saying, "Oh, I live in Purley." It's rather posh. In actual fact, Tilehurst, which is where I live, and Purley are almost blended into one. I think, like many of these towns, you can drive through an urban area, and you're driving from what used to be village to village. Some again, because the Thames is to our left, there is some super property, and the towpath doesn't go on this side of the river. So where there's a towpath, the property isn't so grand. Here on the left here, if you drove down that road, you can't even get into it. So it's electric gated, and there's a farm and a beautiful house, which if you ever take a river trip, I'm sure you'll be able to see a little bit better. We're fully back into, well, I would, yeah, still call this Purley, but really it's, to our right is really Reading, if the truth be told. We've still got a banding with us all the way down this road. So really at the roundabout, as we come to the bottom of this hill, I would probably state that that's where Reading starts, or Tilehurst. There's probably a sign somewhere, but the estate to the right here, I don't think anybody would dream of saying they lived in Purley if they lived there. It's considered to be Tilehurst. And again, this road, it's a main road, it's a 30 limit, which, yeah, you have to be very aware, because I think it used to be a 40 or a 50, but certainly it's a 30 now. You have to be very sort of aware of this. They're gradually ploughing down all these trees and building. You see there to your right, there's a beautiful bit of frontage that those houses have got. Behind there, there's houses which are sort of set back in a piece of frontage, but they're gradually, obviously, money's money. People say, we'll give you $500,000 for this. That's what happened to these houses on the right here. These were built on that piece of frontage. So really, for those that travel, you think, oh God, look at that. That's a beautiful piece of land gone. But if you sat on that land doing nothing, you can't use it for anything else. You'd think, well, money's money. That there is, I think, the Roebuck, famous for, was a pub, hotel, 3 men in a boat fame. And there is a towpath from the Roebuck down to our left here, all the way down to Caversham, and through Reading, in actual fact, on the Thames, which is quite a pleasant sort of walkway. And surprisingly, now it's getting more and more used by commuters who are cycling. I've noticed the electric cycles, they're starting to use the towpaths, which I suppose somebody's going to reel in sooner or later, although progress is progress. An electric bicycle, if it's pegged as they are at, I don't know, what's 19 miles an hour, it shouldn't make too much damage. But now the only thing I would say is that the electric bicycles, which I think are fantastic, by the way, are looking very much like They've got moped tyres. They've got huge balloon tyres, obviously for a bit of comfort, because you've got this electric motor that can drive you along. And people are saying, well, up yours. I'm riding my electric bicycle on pavements and whatever. So, of course, used sensibly, I don't see a problem. But I think the law is going to have to start looking at, well, nothing more than reinstating the actual laws. I'm no different to anybody else. If I'm riding a bicycle on a bloody busy road, I'd rather be on the pavement than on the road. But when you've got an electric bicycle which de-restricted are doing sort of 25 miles an hour, it's a problem waiting to happen. Rather like our friends in the disabled things. They're because an electric motor, it's rather on and off, and they use a thumb throttle. And there have been quite a few incidents now where people are getting hurt with these electric buggies running amok. Electric cars, electric buggies, they all can run amok. And the thing with the electric motor, it's just so easy. Just press a button and it does engage, rather like a vacuum cleaner. It starts off, it's instant, it's all at once power. But I dare say we will adapt. So really that's about it. We're back to Tilehurst now. As I say, this Tilehurst village they call this, which by today's standards you have to have a bit of a laugh at. Village by eye. It's a massive area now which straddles the entire west of Reading. If you follow the road forward in front of you, it takes you all the way back down to the A4 on the motorway and past a landmark which anybody who travels up and down the motorway would know as the water tower. The water tower, at Remembrance Day they illuminate it red, which has to be said looks beautiful. It's a wonderful gesture. But you'll know that if you travel up and down the M4 corridor, the water tower is when you're coming back, for us obviously, when you're coming back from a long way away, you see the water tower, you think, oh, nearly home. In truth, you've got like another half an hour.